I wasn't planning to check my email that morning. I was already feeling low one of those days where the silence feels heavier than usual. But out of habit, I opened my inbox, and there it was. An email from her. No subject line, just her name. My heart dropped. My fingers hovered over the mouse. Part of me wanted to delete it without reading, but I couldn't. I clicked, and as the words loaded, it felt like the air was being pulled out of the room. It wasn't a long message, just a, "Hi, hope you're well." But that was enough to knock everything loose again. I thought marrying her would fix everything, the loneliness, the fear that I'd wasted my life, the way failure clung to me. I was 48, broke, and barely hanging on. She was 21, full of energy, full of promises. I thought I got lucky. I thought it was love. But looking back, I wasn't special. I was just next. She didn't fix me. She emptied me. And by the time I realized what was really happening, she already had everything: the money, the apartment, the escape plan. All I had left was the silence. If you're watching this, maybe you've felt that kind of hope before. Or maybe you're somewhere in the middle of it right now. Either way, I hope my story helps. Please like, comment, and subscribe if it resonates with you, and let me know where you're watching from. I read every comment, and believe me, they help more than you know. And to the ones who keep coming back, video after video, super thank you. You're the reason I can sit here and talk about the stuff most men are too ashamed to admit out loud. This one still stings to talk about, but maybe it needs to be said for the next guy before it's too late. Let me take you back to where it all started. I'm sitting here now 3 years later, and I can still feel her hand in mine. That first night in Chiang Mai when everything seemed possible. The streetlights were dancing off her skin, and she was telling me about her dreams while I told myself this was real. "Cal," she said, squeezing my fingers, "you make me feel safe." Those words hit me like a drug I didn't know I needed. I'd been living in that cramped apartment above my failed food truck for months before I finally gave up and sold everything. North Dakota winters had gotten colder, lonelier. The business I'd poured my life savings into was hemorrhaging money, and at 48 I felt like I was watching my last chance at happiness slip away. Maybe I should just disappear. I told my brother before I left. Start over somewhere. Nobody knows my name. Thailand wasn't a plan, it was an escape. I bought a one-way ticket with the last decent chunk of money I had and told myself I'd figure it out when I got there. The heat hit me like a wall when I stepped off that plane in Bangkok, but something about it felt like freedom. No snow, no creditors calling, no neighbors asking when I'd get my life together. I made my way north to Chiang Mai because someone on the plane said it was cheaper there. I wasn't looking for love. Hell, I wasn't even looking for company. I just wanted to drink cheap beer and pretend my life wasn't falling apart. But then I walked into that bar on Loy Crow Road, and there she was, Saranya. She was serving drinks, laughing with customers, and when she looked at me, really looked at me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Like I mattered. "You look sad," she said when she brought me my third beer. "Why American man always looks so sad?" I should have laughed it off, made some joke, but instead I found myself telling her everything. The failed business, the divorce 2 years earlier, the crushing weight of starting over at middle age. She listened like my pain actually meant something to her. "You are good, man," she said, sitting beside me when her shift ended. "I can see it in your eyes. Good men deserve to be happy." When she took my hand that night, walking through the old city, I felt like I was 25 again. Like the world still held possibilities I hadn't ruined yet. We talked until sunrise about everything and nothing. She told me about growing up poor in a village outside the city, about dreams of opening her own shop someday, about how she'd never met a man who actually listened to her before. "Most men only want one thing," she said, her head on my shoulder as we watched the sun come up over the mountains. "But you are different. You see me." I wanted to believe it so badly that I convinced myself it was true. When she kissed me that morning, soft and careful like I might break, I knew I was falling in love with the idea of being loved again. "Can I see you tomorrow?" I asked, and the smile that spread across her face made me feel like I'd just won the lottery. "I was hoping you would ask," she whispered. That night, lying alone in my cheap hotel room, I replayed every word she'd said, every touch, every look. For the first time in years, I went to sleep excited about tomorrow. Within a week, I couldn't imagine my days without her. Saranya would finish her shift at the bar and come straight to my hotel, sometimes still smelling like cigarette smoke and perfume, but to me she was perfect. I don't like working there, she told me one evening as we shared street food from a vendor near the night bazaar. But I need the money to help my family. The way she said it, so matter-of-fact and resigned, broke something inside me. Here was this beautiful, smart woman stuck in a job she hated because life had given her no other choice. "What if you didn't have to work there anymore?" I asked. She looked at me with those wide, hopeful eyes. "What do you mean?" I wasn't thinking clearly. I was thinking with my heart, with my desperate need to be needed by someone again. "I mean, what if I helped you, just until you figure out what you want to do next?" The apartment I found for us was small but clean, in a newer building with air conditioning and a view of the mountains. It cost more than I should have been spending, but watching Saranya arrange our few belongings, humming Thai songs under her breath, made every baht worth it. "This is ours?" she asked, spinning around in the empty living room. "Ours?" I confirmed, and she threw her arms around my neck like I'd just given her the world. Maybe I had. She quit the bar that week. "I told them I have boyfriend now who take care of me," she said, laughing as she showed me the angry messages from her former boss. "He say I'm stupid, but I know you're good man." I felt proud, protective, like I was finally doing something right with my life. We fell into a routine that felt like the relationship I'd always wanted but never found. Morning coffee together on our tiny balcony, afternoon walks through the old city, evenings cooking simple meals and watching Thai soap operas I pretended to understand. "Cal," she said one night, curled up against me as rain drummed on our windows, "I want to ask you something important." My heart started racing. Was she going to ask for more money? Was she unhappy? "What is it?" She was quiet for a long moment, tracing patterns on my chest. "Do you think we could be married someday?" "Not now, but someday?" The question hit me like lightning. Marriage. The word that had terrified me since my divorce. But looking at her face, so vulnerable and hopeful, I knew my answer. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Yes, I think we could." She started crying then, happy tears that made me feel like a hero. "Really? You would marry Thai girl like me? Like her?" She talked about herself like she was somehow less than worthy, and it killed me. "I would marry you because you're you," I told her. "Not because you're Thai, not because you're young, not because you're beautiful, because you make me want to be better than I am." 2 weeks later, I proposed. Nothing fancy, just a simple gold ring from a shop in the tourist district and a speech I'd practiced in my head for days. We were sitting by the river, watching the sunset paint the water gold, when I got down on one knee. "Saranya, I know we haven't known each other long, but I know my heart. I know that every day with you feels like a gift I don't deserve. Will you marry me?" She said yes through tears, and her friends from the bar came to celebrate with us that night. They seemed genuinely happy for her, telling her how lucky she was, how I was a good man. "You take care of our Saranya," one of them said to me seriously. "She has big heart, but people hurt her before." I promised I would. I meant it with every fiber of my being. The marriage visa paperwork was more complicated than I'd expected. We needed documents, translations, interviews, and enough proof of our relationship to convince the Thai government we were legitimate. "You need fixer," Saranya told me when we got overwhelmed by the bureaucracy. "My friend knows someone who help." The fixer was a middle-aged Thai man named Somchai, who operated out of a tiny office near the immigration building. He spoke perfect English, and had the tired eyes of someone who'd seen every kind of visa scam in the book. American man, Thai woman, he said, looking over our paperwork. Very common. Usually work out fine if both people honest. Something in his tone made me uncomfortable. Is there a problem with our application? I asked. He shrugged. No problem with paperwork, but you meet her at bar on Loy Crow Road? I nodded. How long you know each other? 3 months, I said, suddenly feeling defensive. 3 months? And you want Mary? He leaned back in his chair, studying me. Listen, friend, I help many people like you. Most bar girls from that area, they have system. Rotate foreigners every few months. Get money, get visa, move to next one. The words hit me like a slap. That's not what this is, I said firmly. You don't know Saranya. Somchai held up his hands. Maybe you right. I hope you right. But I see this story many times. Girl quit bar, man pay everything, marriage visa, then girl disappear with new sponsor. I wanted to punch him. How dare he reduce what Saranya and I had to some kind of con game? She's not like that, I insisted. She loves me. I'm sure she do, he said, but his tone suggested otherwise. Just be careful, okay? Keep some money for yourself. Don't give everything before marriage complete. I paid his fee and left, furious at his cynicism. But as I walked back to our apartment, his words kept echoing in my head. Rotate foreigners. System. New sponsor. How did it go? Saranya asked when I got home. She was cooking pad thai, wearing one of my old t-shirts that hung loose on her small frame. Fine, I said, but I couldn't shake Somchai's warning. Saranya, can I ask you something? She looked up from the stove. Of course. That man, the fixer, he said that some girls from your old bar, that they date different foreign men for money. Like a business. I felt stupid even saying it, but I needed to hear her response. She laughed, but it sounded forced. He say that about me? I nodded. Her expression hardened. Cal, you know me. You know my heart. Why you listen to bitter old man who make money from people's problems? She was right. Why was I letting some stranger plant doubts about the woman I loved? I'm sorry, I said. I needed to know. She came over and took my hands. Look at me. I choose you. Not for money, not for visa, because you are a good man who treat me like I matter. You think I pretend to love you for 3 months? The way she looked at me, hurt and disappointed, made me feel ashamed. No, of course not. To prove my faith in her, I bought the gold jewelry her family expected for our engagement ceremony. 20,000 baht for a necklace and earrings that would show her village I was serious about their daughter. You don't have to do this, she said when I showed her the jewelry box, but her eyes lit up like a child's at Christmas. I want to, I told her. I want your family to know how much you mean to me. She cried again, holding the necklace up to the light. Cal, you make me so happy. I never have beautiful things like this before. Watching her joy, I felt vindicated. This wasn't a scam or a system. This was a woman who'd grown up with nothing, finally being treated the way she deserved. Somchai didn't know what he was talking about. He was just another bitter expat who'd been burned and wanted to spread his misery to others. I had something real with Saranya. I could feel it every time she looked at me, every time she laughed at my terrible attempts at speaking Thai, every time she curled up against me at night like I was her safe harbor. I wasn't some mark in a con game. I was a man in love with a woman who loved me back. At least, that's what I told myself. The first time Saranya disappeared, I convinced myself it was normal. I have to go help my aunt, she told me on a Thursday morning, packing a small bag while I drank my coffee. She's sick and needs someone take care of her. I offered to drive her, to come along, but she shook her head. Family business, Cal. You understand. I didn't understand, but I didn't want to seem controlling. How long will you be gone? Maybe 2, 3 days. I call you tonight. She kissed me goodbye, and I spent the day thinking about how lucky I was to have found someone who cared about family the way she did. But she didn't call that night, or the next night. By Saturday, I was pacing our apartment, checking my phone every few minutes. When she finally walked through the door on Sunday evening, I was ready to explode with worry. "Where were you? Why didn't you call?" She looked exhausted, her usual brightness dimmed. "I'm sorry, Cal. Aunt was very sick. No phone signal in village. I tried to call, but..." She trailed off, and I pulled her into my arms, relief flooding through me. "I was so worried," I whispered into her hair. "I thought something happened to you." "I'm here now," she said, but something felt different about the way she held me back. The second disappearance happened 3 weeks later. This time it was her mother who needed help with some kind of land dispute. "Very complicated," she explained, showing me a document written entirely in Thai that could have said anything. "Need to go to government office, maybe take few days." I was starting to recognize the pattern, the sudden family crisis, the vague explanations, the need to leave immediately. "Can't this wait until after our wedding?" I asked. "We were supposed to have our ceremony in 6 weeks. Cal, this my family? If I don't help, they lose their land? You want me to ignore my family?" The guilt was immediate and sharp. What kind of man would I be to put our wedding plans above her family's livelihood? "Of course not," I said. "I'm sorry. How much do they need?" She hesitated. "Maybe 30,000 baht, for lawyer and government fees." It was more money than I was comfortable spending, but the desperation in her eyes convinced me. "Okay," I said, pulling out my phone to transfer the money. "But please try to stay in touch this time." She promised she would, but I knew before she left that I wouldn't hear from her for days. This time I did something I'd never done before. I went to her old bar. Not to check up on her, I told myself, just to have a drink and maybe talk to someone who knew her. The bartender remembered me. "Oh, you Saranya boyfriend," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "She not working here anymore, right?" "Right," I said. "She's visiting family. I was just wondering if any of her friends were around." The bartender exchanged a look with another girl I didn't recognize. "Family visit, ah?" "She go visit family a lot lately." There was something in her tone that made my stomach clench. "What do you mean?" But she just shrugged and moved on to other customers. I sat there for 2 hours, nursing a beer and watching the dynamics of the bar, the way the girls rotated between customers, the practiced smiles, and calculated intimacy. I found myself wondering if Saranya had sat in that same spot with other men, told them the same stories, made them feel just as special as she'd made me feel. When she came back this time, she had a new phone. "Old one broken," she explained when I asked about it. "Drop in water." She seemed different, more distant, checking the new phone constantly, jumping whenever it buzzed. "Everything okay with your family?" I asked over dinner. "Yes, everything fine now. Land problem solved." But she wouldn't meet my eyes when she said it. That night, as she slept beside me, I found myself studying her face in the moonlight, looking for clues to what was really going on. The woman I'd fallen in love with had been open, transparent, eager to share every detail of her day with me. This version of Saranya felt like she was somewhere else, even when she was right next to me. I wanted to ask her directly what was happening, but I was terrified of the answer. Instead, I told myself I was being paranoid, that the stress of wedding planning and visa applications was making me imagine problems that didn't exist. But deep down, in a place I didn't want to acknowledge, I was starting to understand what Somchai had tried to warn me about. The end came on a Tuesday morning in March, though I didn't know it was the end when she started crying at breakfast. Saranya had been quiet for days, distracted in a way that made me feel like I was losing her one breath at a time. "Cal," she said, pushing her rice around her plate without eating, "I need to tell you something very important." My heart started hammering. Was she pregnant? Sick? Having second thoughts about our wedding? What is it? She looked up at me with those eyes that had first captured me, but now they were filled with something that looked like goodbye. "My mother is very sick, more sick than before. The doctors say she might die if she don't get treatment soon. The words hit me like ice water. What kind of treatment? What's wrong with her? Heart problem. She need operation in Bangkok. Very expensive. Maybe 200,000 baht. The number staggered me. I had maybe 80,000 left in my account, and that was supposed to last us until I figured out how to make money in Thailand. That's a lot of money, I said carefully. I know is a lot, but Cal, she is my mother. If I don't help her, she will die, and I will never forgive myself. The tears were real. I could see that much. But something about the timing, the amount, the way she was presenting it as an ultimatum rather than a problem we could solve together felt wrong. Can I see the medical records? I asked. Maybe there's another way to handle this. Payment plans, insurance, something. Her face hardened. You don't trust me. It's not about trust. It is about trust, she interrupted. After everything we've been through, you still think I lie to you. She was turning it around on me again, making my reasonable questions sound like accusations. Saranya, I love you, but this is every penny I have left. If I give you this money, I'll have nothing. What if something happens to us? What if you need more? She stood up from the table, and I knew I'd said the wrong thing. If something happens to us, Cal, you think I take your money and leave you? The way she said it, with such hurt and disbelief, made me feel like the worst kind of person. No, that's not what I meant. I'm scared. I'm scared of being broke and alone again. You not alone. You have me, but only if you show me you trust me like I trust you. I gave her the money that afternoon, all of it. 80,000 baht transferred to an account she said belonged to her cousin in Bangkok, who would coordinate the medical treatment. Thank you, Cal, she whispered, holding me tight after I showed her the confirmation. I never forget this. When my mother is better, when we are married, I will pay you back everything. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. When do you leave? I asked. Tomorrow morning, but I come back soon as possible. Maybe 1 week, maybe 2. 2 weeks stretched into a month. At first, she called every few days with updates. Her mother was in surgery. The recovery was complicated. The doctors needed more time to monitor her condition, but the calls became less frequent, shorter, more distant. I miss you so much, she would say, but it sounded rehearsed, like something she was saying because she thought she should. I started calling her instead, but half the time she didn't answer. When she did, there was always noise in the background, traffic, music, other voices that didn't sound like a hospital. Saranya, I need to know when you're coming home, I said during what turned out to be our last real conversation. I'm running out of money for rent. I might have to move to a cheaper place. There was a long pause. Cal, I have more bad news. The doctors say my mother need more treatment. Maybe I have to stay here longer than we thought. My heart sank. How much longer? I don't know. Maybe few more months. Months? The word echoed in my head like a death sentence. And what about us? What about our wedding? Another pause. Maybe we have to wait a little bit. But I still love you, Cal. Nothing changed that. Everything was changing, though. I could hear it in her voice, feel it in the growing distance between her words and the woman I'd fallen in love with. I want to come visit you, I said desperately. I want to meet your mother, help take care of her. No. The response was so sharp, so immediate, that it cut through all my denials and delusions. She very sick. Better you stay in Chiang Mai, wait for me come back. That night, I sat in our empty apartment, my empty apartment, and finally let myself face the truth I'd been avoiding for weeks. She wasn't coming back. The mother who needed surgery, the land disputes, the family crises, it had all been a carefully constructed story designed to extract everything I had to give. I wasn't her boyfriend. I wasn't her fiancé. I was her sponsor, her temporary ATM, her February guy. And now that the account was empty, My usefulness had expired. I walked back to her old bar on a Thursday night, 2 weeks after our last phone call. I didn't have a plan. I just needed to be somewhere that still held pieces of her, even if those pieces were lies. The place looked exactly the same, but I felt like a different person walking through those doors. The bartender recognized me immediately. "Hey, where's Saranya?" she asked with practiced cheerfulness. "She not come around anymore." I sat down heavily on the same stool where I'd first seen her. "She's in Bangkok, taking care of her sick mother." The words felt like ash in my mouth. The bartender's expression shifted slightly, and she glanced around before leaning closer. "You want drink?" I nodded and ordered a beer, the same brand I'd been drinking the night I met Saranya. As she poured it, the bartender lowered her voice. "You know Saranya, not in Bangkok." My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "She here in Chiang Mai. I see her last week at different bar with Australian man. Big guy, maybe 50 years old." The beer glass slipped from my hand, hitting the bar with a sound like breaking bones. "That's impossible. She's taking care of her mother." The bartender looked at me with something that might have been pity. "Friend, I think maybe you don't understand how this works." Another girl approached, one I recognized from the celebration dinner after our engagement. "You are Cal, right? Saranya's American boyfriend?" "Former boyfriend." I wanted to correct her, but I just nodded. "She told us about you," the girl continued, sliding onto the stool next to mine. "Said you were very kind man, very generous." The way she said generous made it sound like a weakness. "Can I ask you something?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Was I just another customer to her? The two girls exchanged a look that told me everything I needed to know. "Listen," the second girl said gently. "Saranya is good girl, but she have to survive. Her family very poor, bar work not enough money. So she find sponsor, someone who take care of her for few months, help with family problems." "Sponsor," I repeated. The word tasted bitter. "How many sponsors has she had?" "You really want to know?" the bartender asked. I thought about it for a long moment. Did I want to know? Would it change anything? Would it make the pain worse or better? "Yes," I said finally. "I need to know." "You were February guy," the first girl said matter-of-factly. "Before you was German man, November to January. Before him was English man, maybe September to October." They weren't being cruel, just stating facts, like they were discussing the weather. "What about the Australian?" "He start maybe 2 weeks ago." She call him Mark. 2 weeks ago. Right around the time she told me her mother needed more treatment and she'd have to stay in Bangkok longer. "Does he know about me?" I asked. The girl shrugged. "Probably not. Usually they don't know about each other. Make it complicated." I sat there for another hour, drinking beer and trying to process what I'd learned. The woman I'd loved, the woman I'd proposed to, the woman I'd given everything to save her mother, she'd been running the same story on multiple men simultaneously. While I was sitting in our apartment, worried sick about her and her family, she was building a new life with someone else. The family emergencies, the sick mother, the land disputes, they were all just exit strategies, ways to extract the maximum amount of money before moving on to the next mark. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked the bartender as I prepared to leave. She looked at me seriously. "Because you seem like nice man, and because maybe if you understand, you not hate her so much." "I don't hate her," I said, and realized it was true. I was devastated, humiliated, financially ruined, but I didn't hate her. Maybe I should have. But all I felt was a hollow sadness for both of us. For her, trapped in a system that turned love into a commodity. For me, so desperate to be needed that I'd ignored every red flag. "She probably not even know she hurting you," the girl added. "For her, this just business. Way to survive." As I walked home through the empty streets of Chiang Mai, I found myself thinking about survival. Saranya was surviving the only way she knew how, using the tools life had given her. And I had been surviving too, in my own way, using my loneliness and need to feel important as an excuse to believe in something too good to be true. We'd both been playing roles in a story that was always going to end badly. The only difference was that she'd known it from the beginning. I wrote her a letter I never sent. Maybe I needed to say the words out loud even if she'd never hear them. Maybe I needed to forgive us both before I could figure out how to live with what had happened. I sat at the small desk in our apartment, my apartment with a pen in my hand and her face in my memory, and I tried to make sense of it all. "Dear Saranya," I wrote, then stopped. "What do you say to someone who was never really who you thought they were? How do you address a ghost? I know you're not coming back. I've known it for weeks, maybe months, but I couldn't admit it to myself until I went to the bar and heard about Mark. I hope he's kinder to you than life has been. I hope he doesn't ask too many questions when you disappear for family emergencies." I paused, staring at the words on the page. Was I being bitter? Was I being fair? I started again. "I keep thinking about the night I told you about my food truck, about how everything fell apart back in North Dakota. You listened, like my failure actually mattered to you. Maybe it did matter, in that moment. Maybe the line between performing care and feeling care isn't as clear as I thought it was. I want to believe that some part of what we had was real, even if the foundation was built on need rather than love." The words kept coming, flowing out of me like blood from a wound that had been festering for months. "I don't blame you for what you did. I think I understand it now, in a way I couldn't when I was still trying to be your hero. You saw a lonely middle-aged man with money and a desperate need to feel important, and you gave him what he needed in exchange for what you needed. It was a transaction dressed up as romance, but maybe that's what all relationships are on some level. Maybe I just wanted the transaction to be permanent and exclusive. I thought about her family, the village she'd grown up in, the limited options available to a beautiful girl with no education and no money. Who was I to judge the choices she'd made? I used to think you took advantage of me, but I think maybe we took advantage of each other. I needed to feel like a savior, and you needed to be saved. The problem is that I actually thought I could save you. And you knew from the beginning that salvation isn't something one person can give another." The hardest part to write was the admission of my own complicity. I ignored every warning sign because I didn't want to see them. When Somchai told me about the rotation system, when you started disappearing for days at a time, when your stories stopped adding up, I chose to believe you because the alternative was admitting that I was a fool, that I was so desperate for love that I'd confused loneliness with connection, need with intimacy. I let you take everything because giving you everything made me feel like I had everything to give. I paused again, my hand cramping from writing, my eyes burning with tears I hadn't let myself cry until now. The worst part isn't that you lied to me. The worst part is that I lied to myself. I told myself that age didn't matter, that the circumstances of how we met didn't matter, that the power imbalance between us didn't matter. I told myself that love was enough to overcome all of that. But love without honesty isn't love at all. It's just two people using each other and calling it romance. The letter went on for pages, covering everything I wished I'd said and everything I was glad I hadn't. I wrote about the mornings we'd shared coffee on our balcony, about the way she'd looked at me when she thought I wasn't watching, about the moments when her guard had dropped, and I'd glimpsed the scared young woman beneath the practiced smiles. "I don't think you're a bad person," I wrote near the end. "I think you're a person trying to survive in a world that gave you very few choices. I think I was a person trying to survive too, and we found each other at a moment when we both needed something the other could provide. The tragedy isn't that it ended, the tragedy is that it was never really what either of us needed, even though it felt like everything we wanted." When I finished writing, I folded the letter carefully and put it in the drawer of the desk where it would never be found, never be sent, never be read by the person it was meant for. But writing it had given me something I hadn't expected, not closure exactly, but clarity. I understood now that forgiveness wasn't about excusing what had happened, but about accepting my part in it and choosing to move forward without the weight of hatred or self-pity. Saranya had moved on to her next chapter, her next sponsor, her next attempt at survival. Now, it was time for me to do the same. The packing took less time than I'd expected. After 4 months in Thailand, I'd accumulated surprisingly little: some clothes, a few books, the gold jewelry I'd bought for our engagement that she'd conveniently forgotten to take with her. I left the jewelry on the kitchen counter with a note for the landlord. For next month's rent, I wrote. It seemed fitting somehow. I moved to a guest house in a small beach town 4 hours south of Chiang Mai, a place where nobody knew my story and I could disappear into anonymity. The room was basic: a bed, a desk, a window that looked out over the water, but it was mine, paid for with the last of my savings. No shared dreams, no broken promises, just quiet mornings and the sound of waves. I started sketching again for the first time in 20 years. Nothing ambitious, just the view from my window, the faces of the other guests at breakfast, the way the light changed throughout the day. My hands remembered the movements even after all this time, and there was something therapeutic about creating something that belonged entirely to me. "You're an artist?" asked Sarah, an Australian woman in her 60s, who'd been living at the guest house for 3 years. "Used to be," I said. "Long time ago." "What happened?" I almost told her about the food truck, about trying to be practical, about choosing security over passion and failing at both. Instead, I just said, "Life happened." She nodded like she understood. Life has a way of making us forget who we are. But sometimes we remember. The sketching led to painting, watercolors bought from a shop in town that catered to tourists who wanted to try their hand at art. I wasn't good. My technique was rusty, my color choices muddy, but for the first time since I'd arrived in Thailand, I was doing something for myself rather than for someone else. The anger took longer to fade than I'd expected. Not at Saranya, that had burned out surprisingly quickly once I understood the game we'd both been playing. The anger was at myself for being so willing to be deceived, for mistaking desperation for love, for throwing away everything I had for a fantasy that was never going to last. "You're being too hard on yourself," Sarah said one evening as we shared a bottle of wine on the guest house terrace. I'd told her some of my story, not all of it, but enough for her to understand why I'd ended up here. We all make mistakes in love. The lucky ones learn from them. "What did you learn from yours?" I asked. She smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. That loving someone and being compatible with someone are two different things. That good intentions don't guarantee good outcomes. That sometimes the person you think you're saving is actually trying to save you. Her words stayed with me for days. Had Saranya been trying to save me in her own way? By making me feel needed, wanted, important? Maybe the salvation had been temporary and expensive, but for those first few months, I'd felt more alive than I had in years. I stopped checking her social media after the first month. The photos of her with Mark, the Australian who'd replaced me, hurt too much, not because I was jealous, but because they looked exactly like the photos she'd taken with me. The same poses, the same expressions, the same manufactured intimacy. Seeing the pattern from the outside made me understand how carefully constructed it all had been. Every gesture, every word, every moment of apparent spontaneity had been practiced, refined, perfected through repetition with men like me. It should have made me feel worse, but somehow it made me feel better. If it was all performance, then my failure to recognize it wasn't a character flaw, it was just human nature, colliding with professional necessity. The healing happened gradually, like watching a wound close. Some days I'd wake up and not think about her for hours at a time. Other days, something would trigger a memory. The smell of jasmine, the sound of Thai music from a passing car, the sight of a couple holding hands, and I'd be back in that apartment, believing in something that was never real. But even those moments became less sharp over time, more like looking at old photographs than reliving fresh pain. I learned to be alone without being lonely, to enjoy my own company without needing someone else to validate my worth. The sketches became paintings, the watercolors became oil canvases that I sold to tourists for enough money to keep living simply. Not the life I'd planned, but a life that belonged entirely to me. 6 months after leaving Chiang Mai, I got a message from an unknown number. "Cal, This is Saranya. I hope you are well. I want to say sorry for everything. I never mean to hurt you. You are a good man and deserve better than what I give you." I stared at the message for a long time, my heart racing despite everything I'd learned. My first instinct was to respond, to ask why she'd done it, to demand explanations or apologies or closure. Instead, I deleted the message without replying. There was nothing she could tell me that would change what had happened, and nothing I could say that would change who she was or who I had been. The conversation was over, had been over for months. All that remained was learning to live with the story we'd written together, even if we'd been writing different stories all along. I never went back to Chiang Mai. Never tried to contact her again. Never sought revenge or closure or understanding beyond what I'd already found. Some stories don't end with resolution, they just end. Some people come into your life to teach you something about yourself, and once the lesson is learned, they disappear as suddenly as they arrived. Saranya taught me that love without wisdom is just need wearing a disguise. That desperation makes us willing to believe anything that feels like hope. That sometimes the person who breaks your heart is also the person who forces you to rebuild it stronger than before. I wouldn't wish the experience on anyone, but I wouldn't trade it either. It cost me everything I had, but it gave me something I hadn't possessed in years, the knowledge that I could survive losing everything and still find reasons to wake up in the morning. The truth about marrying a Thai girl, or any girl for that matter, isn't about nationality or age or circumstances. It's about honesty with yourself and with the person you claim to love. I thought I was being honest, but I was lying to myself about my motivations, my expectations, and my ability to build a real relationship on the foundation of need rather than mutual respect. She was being honest in her own way too, honest about her priorities and her survival strategies, even if she couldn't be honest about her feelings or her intentions. We were both just trying to get by in a world that had knocked us down and left us scrambling for something to hold on to. We found each other, and for a brief moment, we both felt saved. That the salvation was temporary doesn't make it less real. That it cost everything doesn't make it less valuable. Sometimes the most expensive lessons are the ones we need most. And sometimes getting exactly what you think you want is the only way to discover what you actually need.